This is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, how to build a happy family even if you didn't grow up in one. My guest grew up virtually in a fatherless environment for most of his life. In fact, he didn't meet his real father until he was 30 years old. He says that it was really through his own childhood struggles that he realized his true passion for being a dad. Larry Hagner is the host and creator of Dad Edge podcast. A father of 4 boys, Larry knows firsthand how difficult it can be to raise a family while maintaining your marriage, partnership, life, and your sanity. Not just for dads, Larry's perspective on life and crisis management is applicable to all walks of life. He also authored the book, The Dad's Edge. In this episode, we primarily focus on improving your communication with your significant other, an area most couples can use some help, and strengthening your marriage. Now, if you're not married, I still think there is useful information and practical tips for you in this episode because communication is at the heart of any relationship. Larry honestly talks about his own early communication challenges and how he learned to be better at what he calls tactical empathy, show more vulnerability, and simply listen as opposed to wanting to fix problems. We discuss the 5 dimensions of manhood. Number 1, create a legendary marriage. Number 2, build an epic connection with your kids. Number 3, master your finances and build wealth. Number 4, optimize your physical, mental, and emotional health. And number 5, become a leader in your profession. Also, how to raise money-savvy kids, a topic that he is really passionate about, especially given his background and upbringing. How to have difficult conversations with your spouse without dismissing them or becoming defensive. And finally, how to have a happy family while optimizing your physical, emotional, and mental health. A real challenge many parents struggle with, regardless of gender. Listening to his early life story was like watching a movie. I really like chatting with Larry, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. I would like to suggest a couple of past episodes that explore the topic of marriage, relationships, and divorce to complement this one. I know you love my suggestions. Regardless of your relationship status, I think these episodes are fantastic. Number 1, episode 233, Finding Yourself After a Broken Marriage, a really honest conversation with Pam Savino. Number 2, episode 229, 6 Signs a Marriage is Headed for Divorce. Regardless of its alarming title, I think this is a fantastic conversation about the stigma of divorce, recognizing your needs and communicating them in your relationship, and so much more. And number 3, episode 228, 3 Secrets to Thriving as a Single Dad, that explores race, trauma, and personal growth in the context of parenting with one of our active community members, Justin Mitchell. And now, please enjoy this honest conversation with Larry Hagner. Well, Larry, welcome to the podcast.
What's going on? It's good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, great. It seems like you have your jam, another podcaster. It's always nice to connect with a podcaster because you have good audio, first of all.
You got to have the good microphone. I don't have the audio DJ voice. I don't think so. I need all the help I can get.
Cool. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your podcast, about your work. What is it that you do? Since I genuinely want to know myself, I know a little bit what the Dad Edge is. I think just give me this overview of who you are and what you do and how you serve dads.
Yeah, so the reason I launched Dad Edge podcast 5 years ago was because I woke up and I had an epiphany that I finally knew everything there was to know about being a parent, being a father. And I was like, I got to share this with the world. I'm joking. That's a complete opposite. You're like, is this guy serious? I don't really know. No, podcast.
You can't be because you have 4 teenage boys.
I know, right? Well, just one teenage, the rest are little, but so I have 14, 12, 6, and 4, but no, honestly, yeah, all boys. Yeah. But to answer your question about the podcast, it really just, it came out of struggle, horrible struggle, still does. The cool thing about the podcast is I always say that it's a front row seat to a great education, a front row seat to an invaluable education. So on the podcast, I've done almost 600 episodes, and it's been hours and hours and hours of just being able to learn from people smarter than me, which is so cool. And I was a mess before this, like a total mess. I still have my days where I'm a total mess. And I refuse a lot of times to say, when people ask me what's going on, like, oh, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm busy. Like those are the 3 answers men love to give. And you know what? Sometimes I'm not fine. Sometimes I'm not good. And sometimes I'm way too busy, like way too busy to stop and be intentional and be purposeful and all these things. So I'm guilty of all the ugliness. I'm guilty of all the craziness. And the podcast for me has been something that has been so grounding and it's been so educational. And the cool thing about the audience that listens to Dad Edge is that we all get to learn together. Like at the same time, we're all in the same classroom learning these same skill sets from these amazing individuals. But yeah, it just came out of absolute struggle.
I know what you mean by saying learning opportunity. I just released an episode recently. My podcast has been in August of 2020, 5 years. And I've been thinking that I learned so much from this podcast and through my guests. Like in 5 years, one gets a PhD. And I feel like I did go to grad school for personal development. So I'm there with you. So before how did you have the idea even for a podcast? Why podcast?
Well, I started a blog back in 2013 and I didn't like writing.
Me too. Same year. Yeah.
Look at that.
Oh, that's cool. So I know, this, fatherhood. What does fatherhood mean to you? Let me ask you that first.
Fatherhood means everything to me. And so being a husband, being a father means everything to me. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, like it was the 2 areas of my life where I had the least amount of education. I had the least amount of guidance, and I certainly didn't have a good example of it growing up. So I was lost. I was a complete crap storm, to say the least. My wife will even tell you like the first handful of years, it was kind of rough. And so it's really helped me learn. It's really helped me evolve. And, it's been great to be able to share that with the audience. But the podcast, to answer your question, started the blog, gooddadproject.com back in 2013. And I just started writing about it. And I didn't start writing about fatherhood or being a man or anything like that out of like, oh, I'm preaching from a pulpit, I know everything. It literally, like, I was just sharing questions. I was sharing things that I wasn't good at. I was sharing small things that I was learning along the way of like, oh, so that's how you control your patience a little bit more. That's how you control your anger. Oh, this is how you can communicate more effectively with your wife. Okay, now that makes sense to me. And then after a couple of years of that, I just got tired of writing. And I was like, I just think, I would rather podcast. I would rather take this to a conversation platform because I feel like that's where you really get some learning in. So started it on a whim. I joke about this. I was like, yeah, I had an idea for the first 10 shows. And then after that, I was on God's good humor. So, but he's been good. He is definitely given us a lot of blessings, and things have gone really, really well.
Cool. Yes. So tell me a little bit about your childhood. It sounds like, from what I know, that you grew up without a father, and you met your dad when you were 12 years old for the first time. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of stops between there, but yeah, I was born in 1975. So I turned 45 this past year, and I did not have a father around for the first 4 years. So my biological father and mother were married, I think, for 4 years, 71 to 75. He left. They got divorced. It was a really ugly divorce. I don't know all the ins and outs. I just know it was really bad. And they got divorced, and he was gone, just completely gone. And I'll never forget this. Being 4 years old, I was in preschool, and I remember men coming to school to pick up kids. I knew what a dad was. My friends had dads. I didn't have a dad. Didn't really care. It didn't affect me, because in my 4-year-old mentality, I was like, oh, the moms just go out, they find dads. They just go out and find dads. My mom hadn't found her dad yet. No big deal. I didn't feel like I was missing a thing. I'll never forget the first time my mom brought a man home to have dinner with us. And I think she had been dating him for a little bit of time, or maybe, I don't know, they were smitten on each other in the workplace because they worked together. She brings this guy over. I will never forget this. It's 41 years ago. He comes walking in our front door. I remember what he was wearing. He was wearing a dark 3-piece suit, because he was like a white-collar data software engineer. He had a brown trench coat on. He had a briefcase. He had a mustache and the feathered hair. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. She found us a dad. This is so cool. Like, I thought he was going to be my dad. The very first question I asked this guy when he walked in is, are you going to be my dad? And this guy, like, wait, what? I'm just here for dinner, kid. Take it easy. But lo and behold, they did get married about a year later. I was in the wedding. So I was the ring bearer, and they were married till I was 10. So about 5 years. But every year they were together, it just got progressively worse and worse and worse and worse. They fought more often. They were sleeping in separate bedrooms towards the end. They were screaming. They were yelling. He drank a lot of alcohol. So did my mom. He became pretty mentally and physically abusive. And they got divorced, and he left. And that was it. I haven't seen him since. I actually, unfortunately, about 5 years ago, I found out he passed away, because I was served with papers that he had left me a house, which I declined. And I actually just gave it back to the city. I was like, the city can have it. I don't even want this thing. It was a very small, worthless house. And I just like, I don't even want it. So that's how I found out he passed away. But when I was 12, I started asking a lot of questions about my real father. And so my mom told me all about him. And I actually met him by mistake. It was not meant to be. And we had this relationship for about 6 months. He was remarried, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. We hung out. Like the last 30 days, we were kind of hanging out. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you're dating somebody and they just sort of kind of start pulling the fade away. Like you can tell they're really not that into you anymore. Like it's weird, all this other stuff. And that was the same thing. Like I could tell something was really on his mind and heart, but I just couldn't, at 12 years old, I remember even at 12, I could be like, is everything okay? Like, are you okay? And I always had that very empathetic trait. I still do. And after a while, my dad was like, look, I can't do this anymore. Trying to start over. This is very complicated for me. I have a new family and yada, yada, yada. We parted ways. That was tough. Very, very tough. I was in 8th grade, started eating terrible. I failed 8th grade, just gave up on school. I had to do 8th grade all over again. I did 8th grade all over again, got into a pretty good high school, went on to college, graduated college. Got my first job in pharmaceutical sales right out of college. Fast forward till I was 30, was recently married to the woman I'm still married to now. She's been my first and only wife. She'll be my last. And we were getting ready for our first son. And I was in a Starbucks here in St. Louis for a business meeting. And I'll never forget it. I was 30 years old, and who came walking in to get their morning coffee but my father. I knew exactly who he was right when he walked in. You
recognized him?
Right away. I knew exactly who he was. He hadn't changed much in 18 years. Just a little older, a little rounder, no big thing. So we ended up talking. And now here we are 15 years later. We have a relationship. We have a good one. It's not a father-son relationship. It's more of a mentor sort of friendship type thing, which I'm fine with. And so is he. I have 2 younger half brothers. He's still married to the exact same woman he was when I was 12. And she's great, fantastic. But here's what happened to me. I spent the first 6 years of my fatherhood journey lost, impatient. I knew I wanted to be a good father. I knew I wanted to be a good husband, but I had no clue what to do. Like, not a clue. The one thing I was good at is I was good at taking care of my health, and I was good at my career. And that was about it. So purposeful, intentional husband? Nope. Patient with the kids? Nope. Good Dad Project actually stemmed from a really horrible, dark night. My 12-year-old, he was 4 at the time, stepped out of line. I spanked him. He hit the ground. I'm not proud of that. I went to help him up. He kind of shuddered with fear. So when I saw that, it hit me very, very hard. And I didn't see my son. I saw myself, because I was in several situations. My mom was, I left this part out, but my mom was married 3 times. She dated several men in between. Every guy was the same guy, just alcoholic, abusive in some way, shape, or form, some sort of substance going on. So when I saw that and how it impacted my son, I was like, this has got to change. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And I went into my office and I did what any adult would do. I distracted myself on Facebook, because that's what we do when we're upset, right? And I'll never forget it. In the left-hand corner, it said create a page. And I don't know what it was, but I clicked on that link. I created a page on Facebook called Good Dad Project. And at the time, I was the project. I was like, I need help. I need to make this a project. I need to make this a thing. So I just put it on there. I was like, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm not doing this to gain a community. I'm not doing this to gain fame. I'm just here. I'm going to create this page. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share one new thing that I learn every day. It might be an inspirational post. It might be a tip. It might be a hack, but just something. And that turned into a blog, that turned into a podcast, that turned into a mission and a movement, to a mastermind, to what we are now, which is, it's been an amazing journey. And the podcast is really big. And I never would have thought in wildest dreams we'd be sitting here basically 8 years from that day, talking about this.
Wow. So growing up like that, how do you think that translated into your parenting? Did you have role models, male role models growing up? Like uncles or coaches or things of that nature?
I had one, for sure. It was my grandfather. My grandfather was a blue collar, hard, gritty man's man, working type of person, and very charismatic, but in a genuine way. He was never charismatic because it got him attention. That's just the way he was. So like when he walked into a room, he literally made you feel like the most important person in the room. Like he brought a lot of energy and humor, and just was always very interested in others, And the one cool thing that I got to learn from my grandfather just by watching is how much he loved my grandmother. So he was very affectionate with her, always complimented her, always told her how beautiful she was, always hugged her, always kissed her. And I was over there a lot because my mom was kind of in the dating world. So like there was a stretch there where I spent like every weekend with them, because my mom was kind of going out and dating and that kind of thing. So I did have that. Coaches, not so much. I wasn't the most athletic dude growing up. Uncles, no. But him, yes. But going back to, I think for me, and I think a lot of this is just by human nature. If we focus on what we're not going to do, what we resist tends to persist. So it's almost like if I were to tell you, Anna, don't think of an elephant. What are you thinking of? Right?
Yes.
No, yeah. Right. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be patient. I'm not going to lose my temper. I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to be this. I'm not going to be that. And every bit of intentionality around that just failed miserably. And what I really realized, it was that I missed the skill. Marriage is a skill. Yes, it's a feeling. Communication in marriage is a skill. Raising kids is a skill. Communication with kids is a skill. Taking care of your mental, emotional, physical health, that's a skill. Mastering your personal finances, it's a skill. Being a leader, skill. All these things are skill sets, yet most of us feel that it should be more of a feeling and it should come natural. And that's not the case.
Yeah. And then, yes, that's a myth, right? It's work. All of the things you mentioned, it takes energy, time, effort, work, skills, development. But I think first and foremost, it takes a mindset, like a growth mindset. Some people have a fixed mindset. Some people have a growth mindset. I think from our very short conversation in the beginning, I already could tell that you have this growth mindset to better yourself, to develop and to constantly master your skill set and in yourself. So that's a wonderful place to be, that to have that mindset, right? And then you have to have that willingness and dedication to the work, because many people have the desire perhaps to have a great marriage, to have great children, to be great parents, but somehow they fall short, right? And so I love your framework. Can you tell me a little bit about the 5 dimensions of being a man, being a father, and why the 5 domains, why the 5 areas, and then we'll go into a couple of them and discuss a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So after I podcasted for probably 3 years, I was like, what are the themes that are emerging for men? What do men need most? What is on their minds and the hearts of men who are married? And here's what really came up. Mastering our personal finances. There is nothing that's going to cause more stress. Well, there's a lot of things, but there's a lot. The divorce rate in America right now is 50%. 50% of those divorces are due because of finances and financial stresses. So that plays a huge part in the divorce rate right now. Mm-hmm. But if people understood finances as far as how to manage them, how to talk about them, and also how to accept the fact that you probably married a very different financial personality than you are, it would probably be a little bit easier. It's kind of like the 5 love languages, but it's almost like the 5 love languages of finances and understanding what each person needs and what their vision is and all that good stuff. We're not taught that. The other one is optimizing physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. If I look at every single man that I've ever stood nose to nose, toes to toes with, as far as in our mastermind and in our community, whatever, when a man gets married and when he has a kid, the first thing he will throw on the shelf is his health. Physical, mental, and emotional health will go up here because, and here's the cool thing, it comes from a very noble place. Men feel like, I can't take care of me anymore. I got to take care of these people. That's our mentality. We're very giving with that. However, that's really a wrong thing to do, because if you're not your best you, it's really hard to be your best for others. And if you ask the people around you, like, hey, do you want the 50% of me or do you want the 100? What do you think they're going to say? They're going to tell you like, hey, I want the best part. I want the best part of you. So that's another one. Creating a legendary marriage. This really comes from Brandy and Lance Salazar's work. They wrote the book Miracle Morning for Couples. They've really identified 4 pillars within marriage, which is self-care, partnership, friendship, and lovers. And underneath all of that, there's a foundation of communication. All those are its own skill set of how to create that. But we're not taught that. We're like, yeah, I'll get to that in a second. So the other thing too is... Not
only we're not taught that, but from your own story also, we don't have good models, right? We weren't raised in situations that are like exemplary.
Exactly.
Right?
And here's the thing too. So the other one's connection with kids, and the other one is leadership. So those are the 5 dimensions. But here's what I'll compare it to. Those are the 5 most important things in our lives. At the end of our life, it doesn't matter what kind of work we did. It doesn't matter how much money we made, how many cars we had, or blah, 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 blah. What matters is, what was the relationship like in your marriage? What was the relationship like with your kids? How did you take care of yourself? And those types of things. How did you lead others selflessly? And those are the 5 dimensions that we get the least amount of education. It's almost like you needing a surgery. The doctor's like, oh, I haven't been to medical school. They gave me a certificate and wished me the best of luck. So your surgery is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Like, how would you feel about that? You'd feel terrible. But yet when we walk down the aisle and we get married, everyone just sort of like, yeah, best time of your whole life. You'll figure it out. Pat you on the back. Same thing. You take that kid home from the hospital. You don't even know how to put the car seat in the car seat holder. And they're like, yeah, best time of your whole life. You'll be fine. You'll figure it out. We don't expect that in any other part of our life, but that is the expectation. And that's where the bar is set in those dimensions, which is unfortunate.
Let's talk about marriage then. Do the men that you work with or in your community are married men mostly?
Most of them, I would say 90% of them are married.
Mm. So what makes or breaks a good marriage?
It's a great question. So again, I'm gonna reference Lance and Brandy Salazar's work with with what they call the four pillars of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, you have a whole host of men that don't take care of themselves. Okay. Like they're like, oh, I got to do everything for everybody else. I'm not going to take care of me. One of those pillars is self-care. You have to take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so you can take care of your wife. Your wife has to take care of her. So she has her own needs. She's got to take care of herself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually before she can take care of you. And if she's not, that's when burnout starts to set in. That's when like, oh my God, I can't take any more of this anymore. So that's one. The second one is partnership. That's more the business side of marriage. That's the finances, the schedules, the chores, the roles, all those things. A lot of us don't even identify who does what. But unfortunately, according to Miracle Morning for Couples, that's where 50% of arguments start, because that's where expectations usually lie. Well, why am I doing the dishes? She should do the dishes. Why am I cooking dinner again? It should be her turn or his turn. You know, it's like that's where emotional resentment starts. Then there's friendship. You know, that's a deep knowing of each other. That's, do I like spending time with you? Are we in each other's fan club? Are you my buddy? You know, and then there's lovers. I would say for the most part, to answer your question, where do people get it wrong and where do they struggle with the most? Self-care is one. Communication is like, if you could picture those four pillars, communication is like a foundation that holds all those up, right? That's usually filled with cracks and all kinds of issues. So if you're not communicating well, it doesn't matter if you're optimizing those four pillars. You got to talk. So communication is being one. I would say partnership is another, because you have to have those roles identified, like who's doing what, so we don't get all wigged out over who's doing what. I think a lot of us, especially men, are guilty of like, oh, those three will take care of himself. I just want to get to the bedroom. And you can't do that. You know, you got to take care of all this stuff. You got to have that connection, you know, before we get to the bedroom. Then the bedroom's just easy after that.
Let's talk about communication.
Yeah.
Did you struggle with that in your marriage?
I can bring my wife in here and she can tell you how bad I struggle with it. So, but no, I'm kidding. But yeah, I definitely struggled with it. A lot of it had to do with the fact that I was struggling internally, mentally and emotionally, but I felt like I couldn't tell her that, because like I didn't want her to see me as weak, or I didn't have a handle on things. My answers to her was always fine, good, fine. How's your day? You doing okay? Yeah, good. Are you doing all right? You just seem like you're a little off. No, I'm fine. Fine. I'm good. Don't worry about me. And inside, like I was struggling on some things. But communication too, like I was a poor communicator when she was talking to me as well. So if my wife came to me with something that was bothering her, could have been the kids, could have been something at her work, it could be with one of her friends, I put on the Mr. Fix-It hat. Or I would do things like, why are you so upset about that? That doesn't seem that serious. And that does nothing but insult the heck out of her, make her feel completely unloved and unseen. Or I would be like, well, why are you letting her talk to you like that? Like, just go tell her this, go do this, go do this. I don't see how you don't see the problem or the solution. Like that's unfortunately how I used to talk to her. And I thought that I was doing right by giving her advice, pointing her in the right direction, or even being like, why are you so upset about this? Like, calm down. But now what I do is I use tactical empathy. And tactical empathy sounds like you're really overwhelmed right now. And I feel you on that. What is the best way I can support you right now? What feels right? And she'll tell me, you know, she'll be like, I just need you to hear me. Or she'll be like, I need some advice, or I need some help. And she'll tell me exactly what she needs, but she's the one telling me. And I've noticed that's made our relationship so much better.
Clarity of communication, right? Speaking openly and directly about our needs and stating our needs directly to our partners so that they can first, you know, listen. But what if one partner is unable to be present? What if it's overwhelming? What if men don't know how to do empathy? They're not good with feelings. You know, what did they want to dismiss or like you said, fix things, and it may bring up a lot of insecurities, right? If I can't fix it. And sometimes I feel like men don't want to hear about mundane problems and things like that. Do you find that in your community, do people talk about that?
They do. And I always tell men, and so do a lot of our coaches, if you want to have any connection to this woman who means so much to you, then you better start talking to her, and you better do it in the right way. So I think a lot of men also confuse empathy with agreement. Like there are times where, like, you know, just like any other man, I'll be listening to my wife. I'm like, oh my God, like this sounds off. She sounds off her rocker. Like, how is she even upset about this? Right. But I'm not going to tell her that. And here's the other thing too. If this quote helps your listeners, it's this: however she's acting and whatever she is doing and whatever she is saying, it makes total sense to her. It makes total sense to her. So if you can enter into a conversation with her with appreciation and curiosity, I'll say it one more time: appreciation and curiosity. If you're appreciative and curious of what's going on in her world, it's impossible for you to have expectation and agenda. It's almost like you're curious like a kid. Like, wow, so sounds like you had an insane day. Tell me, like, what was the hardest part of today? Why was it so hard? How can we make it better? And just asking those questions. I mean, when my wife and I are talking and she's going through something like that, I want her to do 90% of the talking. The other thing, so tactical empathy is this: men need a map. Tactical empathy is whenever she's talking, she could be like, I'll just use an example here. Oh my gosh, like, I am so stressed out right now. The kids start school tomorrow. I don't know if we have any of the supplies. Like, they haven't taken their showers. They have no clothes out for tomorrow. Like, they're just like, and I don't even know if they're going to go to bed on time. Now, the old me would have been like, well, first of all, don't get so upset. Everybody's got first day of school tomorrow. You know, I don't know why you're so upset. So here's what we'll do. We'll get everything out and we'll tell them to go take a shower at 9:00, and we'll get this kid to do this, and I'll start just barking orders. And so what I do now is sounds like, looks like, feels like. I start every response with those three phrases: sounds like, looks like, feels like. Feels like you're really overwhelmed right now. The first day of school is tomorrow. There's probably a million things to do. We have 4 of these kids, and we have to figure out which one needs to do what. So yeah, that's a lot, right? How can we work together to where you're not feeling so stressed out over this, and you can maybe bring me into this, or we can help each other and we can help these kids get everything that they need for tomorrow? How can we divide and conquer? And we'll start going through those things together.
So we talk in our community and in general, in my work with parents, it's apparent that, the mental load of parenthood falls on the woman's shoulders. Men are participatory, men are responsible. Dads today are not like the dads 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? There's a huge shift in our parenting culture. However, like you were describing, women tend to carry this mental, emotional load of parenthood and worry about things and what I'm going to cook for dinner, the school, the anxieties, the concerns, the laundry. And if they are also working, outside the house, and it's too much for women. I'm wondering, what you're describing is great. When you mentioned about the partnership, who does what and all of that, do you have that in your household, like the division of labor? Do you guys have, I'm curious about that first. What kind of agreements do you have? Are they written agreements? Are they just oral agreements between the two of you? In terms of who does what, responsibilities, that kind of stuff. First, I want to know that.
Yeah. So, is it solidified in like a written thing? No. But my wife and I went through more of a strength finder type of a exercise. So I'll give you an example. I provide. So I make the money. And she's really, really good at spending it. I'm kidding. No, she's really she's really good at paying the bills. She's really good with the shopping and that kind of thing. She's frugal. I'm not. And when I say I'm not, like, I don't know what it is, but like when I see money go out, like I grew up really, really poor. And when I see money go out, I have an emotional tie to that. I'm like, oh, even though it's like, it's bills, it's like the mortgage. And it's like, oh, I don't want to pay that. Like, you know what I mean? But I mean, so she's really good at that. I would say for household duties, like she really takes the brunt of a lot of that. She's a stay-at-home mom. So she takes a lot of that. However, on Saturdays, the one thing that we do is we do what's called a family divide and conquer, which means like my wife will write out a list. Every person has a name. Every person has duties. And like my wife just rips them up, be like, here you go. Here's yours. Here's yours. Here's yours. Here's yours. And so that's great because like, she's like, oh, wow. Like there's a lot of things throughout the house that I could do and get overwhelmed with, but I know on Saturday I get to divvy this out and everybody's going to help me. I would say our agreement for dinners, whoever cooks, the other person cleans up. That's kind of ebb and flow. That's a tough one for my wife. You know, she doesn't like to make the decision a lot for what we're going to eat for dinner. And by the time she gets to that point in her day, she's like, oh my God, the last thing I want to do is cook all these people dinner, which I understand. But we try to communicate that throughout the day because like the last thing we want is 4 hungry boys and two crabby, hangry parents who are like, oh, it's 6:00. We should probably think about what we're going to eat. So we try to get really proactive on that. I'm in charge of all the investments. So I do our real estate investing. I do like our regular investing. I handle all that. I handle like all the stuff that we're planning for. As far as like kids and duties, like we divide and conquer on that one really well as far as who's taking who to practice and those types of things.
Like who makes the dental appointments?
Yeah. So my wife handles all the appointments. And then it's just like, okay, who's going to take them? Who's got the bandwidth to take them? So like I took my oldest son he had to get some tests a couple of weeks ago. I knew my wife was kind of overwhelmed. I'm like, I'll take them. Let me take them. So I took them.
That's what I'm trying to understand. I feel like women put a lot of pressure on themselves in terms of,
yes,
you know, being a mom, in terms of parenting. Don't you think?
Oh my gosh. My wife, I always tell her, I was like, man, just ask for help. Please don't be quietly miserable because my wife will push herself to the brink. And then she's got this guilt when she's like, I just need somebody to take the kids for a couple hours. Like she feels tremendously guilty. And the one thing I always tell her is I'm like, if you need to go out and recharge your batteries, if you need to go out to happy hour with your friends, just ask, just speak up. And a lot of times I won't even wait for that. I'll call her friend. I'll be like, hey, Jill, what are you doing this Friday? Like, okay, you guys are going out, bring your kids over. I'll watch your 2 boys. I'll watch my 4. You guys go out, have a night on the town, have fun. And my wife comes back just recharged. So sometimes she needs just a little bit of a push, not me pushing her, but like sometimes just setting it up for her.
Permission, I guess, to just relax and enjoy herself.
Right.
But see, that's the thing. Even with all the work that you have done, with all the division of labor, with the partnership set up, your wife still feels overwhelmed at times with the school and everything like that. Why do you think it is? You know, what do you see in your community? Can men relate to this overall conversation that women carry the mental load, even though men want to participate and help, and they do? What's going on? Like, what's amiss here?
So I just want to make sure I'm answering your question as specifically as I can when you say the mental load. So do you think, so what do you mean? Like, how can I answer that?
Why do women feel overwhelmed if they do have partners who are willing to participate, who are doing a lot, right? Who take the kids to the practice, who take care of things in the household, make the money and all of that. I don't know what's going on here. Why do...
I can give you the perspective of my wife if it helps. My wife is not every woman, but I can definitely let you in on some of the conversation.
From your personal experience and what you hear from your community, perhaps.
Right. So my wife and I have talked about this a lot because I'm always like, why don't you ever ask for help? Like, why don't you allow us to help you? And she's like, and I think a lot of it boils down to, she's like, I feel guilty. I'm like, guilty about what? Like, what do you feel guilty? She's like, well, I don't work. I'm a stay-at-home mom. Now, granted, there's 4, so it's a lot. It's a lot of errands. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of managing. But I feel like, you stay in your lane and work. I need to stay in my lane. And it's almost like, she's like, think about it for a second. If you can't handle the workload of your work and would you ever ask me for help? And I'm like, no, probably not. Because I feel like I should do it. Like, I'm like, well, this is my thing, so I should be able to do it. And if I can't do it, then is that a reflection on, should I be doing this? And of course I feel guilty. So with my wife, I mean, it boils down, I think, a lot to, she's like, well, this is my job. And my wife will even tell you, this is my job and I should be okay with doing it. And it's a lot of the shoulding things. Like people should on themselves a lot. We should all over ourselves, right? I should do this. I should do that.
Yeah.
My wife is the same way. I should be able to do this. And the thing that I try to always remind her is, I was like, man, you're human though. Like, your job, you never punch out. Like, if you think about it, like when I'm not working and in the evening, like, I will definitely pull my weight. Like I want to help. I'm like one of those guys where I want to help because I know how crazy it can be around here. But literally from the moment these kids wake up till the moment that they go to bed, it is nonstop needs, especially my 4 and 6-year-old. It's nonstop. And anybody in their right mind would get burnt out on that if they didn't have a break. People need those breaks. They need the help.
How have you survived the quarantine? And not that this coronavirus pandemic is over, but how did you survive the first few months?
If I told you it was easy and we had a happy family at all times, I would be bold-faced lying to you. I'll give you an example though, good times and bad. So this whole quarantine has definitely brought out some ugliness in us. It's like, especially like this last week, the kids haven't been in school for 6 months. And it's like, like I said, raising 4 boys in a house, it's almost like a drunk fraternity party that you never leave. There's trash everywhere. There's people peeing on the walls. It's just insane. Like, I say things out loud to these human beings I never thought I would say, and I'm not making this up. Would you please not eat when you're in the bathroom? I never thought I'd have to say that to anybody my whole life. So like, that will drive someone absolutely insane, especially at night. Like my wife and I, like, at night, it's kind of like our time, like our sacred time. And whether we're having sex or we just want to chill out and be with each other, or if we just want to catch up and not hear the words mom or dad for like just 30 minutes before we go to bed. And my 6-year-old and 4-year-old are in that mode where it's like 3 times after we put them to bed, mom, dad, dad. Sometimes they're like in chorus, mom, dad, mom, dad. So it's a lot going on there. So will it drive us crazy? Yes, it does. Has stress been high? Sure. But a lot of it also has to do with the questions that we ask each other. So one thing that we teach in our mastermind a lot is the quality of your life depends on the quality of the questions that you're asking yourself and those around you. So I'll give you an example of how a lot of this has brought us together. When we were struck with quarantine, it was right around Easter for everybody. And for the past 24 years, we've always done the same thing on Easter. We go to my wife's aunt's where she has a family of 70 people that show up. She has a huge family. And the Easter bunny is there and there's an egg hunt and all kinds of stuff. My kids love it. First time in 24 years that we've never done that. And so we sat there on Easter morning and we were like, why has this got to happen? When's quarantine going to be over? Why can't the world go back to normal? Like all these really poor questions. And if we ask these really poor questions, poor answers will come. Why has this got to happen? Why can't this be over? Right. So my wife and I sat there over our morning coffee and we're like, we came up with a question. How might we? So if you can start, if you find yourself in a lull and you're asking any question that starts with why can't I, try the how might we or how might I. So my wife asked ourselves, how might we connect together today in a way that we've never connected before because we're in a situation we've never been? And the answer came, we're like, let's ask the kids. Let's all present this question to the whole family. One kid was like, what if we play flag football? Another one was like, what if we play Pictionary over dinner? What if we watch a movie that we've never seen? Like, and what if we play the game Table Topics, which we ask each other questions on stuff. And we played flag football for an hour and a half. We played Pictionary at dinner. We did all these really amazing things. And at the end of the day, everyone had an amazing day. And it all became because we focused on the right question. And that's the how might we question versus the why can't we question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great shift, right? Instead of this, why is this happening? Poor me, this victim consciousness, turning that again, growth mindset. That's what I'm hearing. So let's talk about communication in a marriage. What kind of poor, ill communication patterns do you see, like in your community? What do you think people struggle the most with when it comes to communication? Let's say maybe men. What are the issues that men struggle with in communication?
Yeah, so go ahead.
And I'll say yes or no from a female perspective.
I think a lot of guys struggle with being authentic because they view it as weakness. I think the reason I use the word authentic is because when you use the word vulnerability, men was just, like what?
Yeah.
Sounds terrible.
Right.
But here's a way to rebrand authenticity and vulnerability. There's a way you can be masculine and be authentic. Because I think a lot of men think that vulnerability is a feminine energy, but you can be very authentic and vulnerable in front of your wife and in a way to communicate with her. So like, for instance, you can tell me if I'm wrong or crazy, but if something's going on for me and I'm a little overwhelmed, that usually makes me distant, and she feels that, she senses that. Now I can tell you what's going on in a wife's mind. I think you can tell me if I'm wrong, but she's probably like, why is he being distant? I don't understand. He seems really overwhelmed, really stressed out. Did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? Does something up with us? Like, I don't really know what's going on. And here's what's going on for a man. Usually it has nothing to do with that. For a man, it's like, well, crap, like I'm really stressed out at work right now. Like my boss is breathing down my neck. I've got deadlines out the yin yang. I feel like I can't even come up for air. And then when I leave work and I come home, like I automatically have to be dad. It's like I have to go from people who need me at work to people who need me at home. I never get a break. And I feel like some days I'm going to go absolutely crazy. So I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. I'm stretched thin. I'm not taking care of myself. So that's what's going on for men. Now, for a man, he's like, I don't want to tell her that. She's got enough to deal with. Like my wife, like she's got 4 kids to deal with. She doesn't need stuff going on with me too, and I don't want her to think for a second, I don't have a handle on this. Like I need to be stoic. I need to be tough. I need to be the man. I need to be her rock, her foundation. What I think men get wrong is that you will distance yourself further from your woman if you don't let her into that world. Now you don't have to let her into it like all the way, like to the point where you're like, wow, that's a lot. Like you just laid some crazy stuff on me. But
and especially if you haven't done it in the past, right? Doing it like out of a blue, it's like, whoa, Right. It could be alarming.
Exactly. You can share what's going on. Like, so for instance, like a conversation with my wife and I, like she'll be like, what's going on with you? I know something's off. And I'll be like, you know what? It's nothing to do with you. Can I just be really real with you for a second? And she's like, yeah. What is it? And I'll be like, man, work has just been crazy lately. Like I have 4 deadlines this week. This happened, that happened. Like I feel like in a way it's kind of sucking the life out of me. And I'm trying to like bounce back. And every time I bounce back, there's something else that like just punches me in the stomach. And I'm just at a point right now where I've been hit and I keep getting more and more overwhelmed. And no matter how much I get done, somebody else needs something else. And the other thing that I'll say to my wife too is like, sometimes I feel very defeated in this house because if I say yes to my wife, I'm saying no to 4 boys. If I say yes to 1 boy, I'm saying no to 3. If I say yes to my friends, I'm saying no to the whole family. If I say yes to work, I say no to the whole family. It's like, I always tell my wife, I feel like I'm letting someone down every day, every minute of every day. So that's a way that you can let your wife in on some things that are going on. You don't have to become like this wet sponge of sobbingness and emotion and all that stuff. The other thing I'll say too is that communication is key. Being an active listener is key. I date my wife, and I've had to learn that the hard way. I date my wife. Like my wife and I have a standing every other week, sometimes weekly, but rarely, but every other week date night. And on that date night, we have a rule. We talk about the kids for 10 minutes, and after that, it's us. And I mean, sometimes like my wife and I, the other night, we Googled top questions to ask married couples. And it came up with these unbelievable 25 questions. I think in 3 hours, we got through 5 of them because that one question leads to amazing conversation. The thing about my wife and I have been married for 17 years. I've known her for 24. She's changed and so have I. So constantly getting to know who that woman is and learning parts of her and pieces of her that I didn't know before, or maybe things that have changed and evolved, staying again, appreciative and curious. That has made all the difference. And our date nights, we don't sit there and stare at each other. And while we watch each other eat, we talk and laugh the whole time. And I think it goes back to, again, like I want to have a deep knowing of who you are, all the way to the core of who you are. And she feels that way about me too. And I think if you bring that energy and if you come prepared, don't be lazy and be like, how's your week been? Oh, that's cool. You know, like I think that's where we get it wrong.
Yeah. Did you have a hard time with vulnerability, with opening up and letting her in? And how have you grown in that area?
I still do. Yeah, I still do. There's still that voice inside me that's like, don't be authentic. Don't let her into too much. But what I've noticed is if I want to disconnect with her in a pretty quick way, just keep thinking that. Because that's not the part of me that she really wants. There are some things though, and this is where I think it's powerful having the right men in your life. You know, a tribe. Like I said, we've got a mastermind community. And the cool thing about that is if there's something really on my mind and heart and it's raw, like the cool thing is I can run it past those men that I really, really trust. I'm like, guys, this is what's going on. Like, here's what's going on in my mind. Here's what's going on in my heart. Like, and they'll just be like, bleh, you know, like all this, like raw stuff. The cool thing about that is when you bounce it off a group of trusted advisors, men who are really important to you in their life, they know you, they know your wife, they'll be like, okay, can understand how you feel that way. Have you thought of this? Or have you thought of that? Or have you thought about using these words instead of this word? Or have you thought about how she's going to take this? You need to be prepared that she might not take that very, very well. So maybe more gentle or this or that or the, you know, so I then get to take something that I've run through 4 or 5 people's filters and I get a much better conversation starter versus what I had in my head before.
What kind of response do you get from your wife when you are more authentic and more vulnerable to the degree that you open yourself up? What are her typical responses to you now and maybe before? How was it before when you wouldn't open up? And, you know, I would love to know the comparison. Has she grown with you, right? It sounds like you both have grown together. How is she responding to you now when you open up and you are more vulnerable?
It's totally different. And sometimes I have to remind myself that she's probably going to be really, really receptive and empathetic. And it's going to bring us closer together because in my male mind, I automatically think, well, that's not going to work, or that's going to be the opposite effect, but nothing sometimes connects us more than when we just get kind of raw with each other about what our demons are, or what's going on with us, or why we're overwhelmed, or why we're not the most patient. So, yeah.
Conflicts. How do you resolve conflicts? And what kind of conflicts do you face? What are the main, like what's the main theme? Is it parenting related? Or if you argue or fight, I mean, fight is a strong word, but disagreements, whatever you want to call it, if you're willing to talk about it, I'm curious, what's the theme, the nature of the conflict that you may have together?
So we're pretty lucky. We don't have very many conflicts very often, but I think it's because we've evolved with our communication so much that we really don't argue that much anymore. I can definitely tell you the tougher conversations that we have. So we definitely, you asked about boundaries and rules and who does what. I can definitely give you our rules of engagement when it comes to tough conversations or conflict or arguments. So if we're in an argument, we have said this out loud, we agree to it, we have lived by it. If we are in an argument or disagreement, I do not speak to her. The octave of my voice doesn't go any higher than the way I'm talking to you right now. It's gentle, respectful. I'm listening with appreciation and curiosity because I truly want to know what's going on for you. I don't necessarily want to come here and defend what I believe. She feels the same way. There's never hitting below the belt. We have never in 24 years ever called each other a name, ever. And the other thing too is that if she makes a call on a disciplinary action on one of our kids and I don't agree with it, or vice versa, we don't call each other out in front of the kids. Be like, wow, you put him in his room? No, Lawson, you don't have to go in your room. That's ridiculous. I would never do that. Neither would she. If we disagreed with the other person, we have that conversation behind closed doors. So that's our rules of engagement when it comes to conflict. Those are the rules. We've lived by them. I can't ever remember a time we've broken them, which has been good. As far as tough things to talk about, I would say money is one. It takes a lot. It takes quite a bit to raise 4 hungry boys who never leave the pantry. You know, we live pretty frugal, but at the same time, like I'm the one who does the budgeting and the investments, and she's the one who handles cash flow. But I'm like, wow, I can't believe we just spent that in groceries, or holy crap, like I didn't know that veterinary bill would be that high. Things like that are tougher. Sex has also been a topic that has been tough for us in the past. It isn't so much anymore, but to where my wife grew up in a home where it wasn't talked about. So to talk about it is really awkward. And I grew up in a home where it wasn't talked about either, but yet I've had my experiences. The more, if you talk about it, it tends to take the taboo away from it. It tends to take that was a topic that we had a tough time with for a while. We don't anymore though.
Mm. What do you mean tough time? Just talking about it? What I like, what do you like? Or this kind in this kind of context?
Yeah. So before, I would say in our younger years, our sex drives were probably off. Mine was high, hers was probably medium. And that was tough a lot of times. And my uneducated, moronic male brain would be like, why aren't we having more sex? That's how I'd approach it. Wrong thing to do. We don't really have that issue anymore. I mean, I still have, I'm still a high drive, but she's high now too, which is great. But as far as talking about it though, we're much more receptive of it because the way I go about it is, so like for instance, if we've gone through like maybe a dry spell or something like that, like if we hadn't had sex in a couple of weeks, and I'll just be like, hey, just wanting to check in. Is everything okay? Just noticed we haven't been together in a while. And a lot of times it has to do with her stress level. If she's really, really stressed out, sometimes it's hard for her. She's like, yeah, it really hasn't been on my radar. It's like when you've got like, sweeping up crumbs and someone smeared icing on you, you don't feel like the sexiest person in the world. So my response to that is like, what do we need to do to make you feel sexy again? Like, do you need a break? You need to get out of here? You want to go out on a date night? Do you want to go out with your friends? Do you want to go for a run? Just get out of here and enjoy, do something for you. A lot of it boils down to if she gets to do something for her and to recharge her batteries, I mean, that helps a ton.
Yeah.
But I would say approaching it with more, again, curiosity, because before I approached it with expectation, why aren't we having sex more? We're married. I expect to have sex. Like that was the vibe I was probably giving off. Now it's more of like, hey, what's going on? Like, how can we make things better here versus why aren't we having sex?
Curious how you're raising your children then, your boys. With what kind of intention are you raising them? What kind of men are they going to be? What do you see now? what kind of conversations you had with them or you're having with them. What kind of intentions have you set for yourself in terms of raising men? I would love to hear a little bit about that too.
So there's definitely guidelines. There's definitely themes. I would say one is honesty. We actually celebrate honesty, even when whatever you're being honest about might not be the prettiest thing. So we have a deal with the kids. If you mess up and you come and tell us and we don't find out about it, or if we find out about it and we ask you about it and you're honest, you don't get punished. We'll have a conversation about it, but there will be no punishment. So what does that look like? My son, I don't know, gosh, this was a while ago, snuck the iPad one night and stayed up all night watching YouTube videos. And he came to me the next day. He's like, I need to tell you something and you can't be mad. I'm like, okay, that's our code. I need to tell you something and please don't be mad. Because I know whatever they're going to tell me is very, very, very authentic. And it's taking a lot of courage for them to say it. And that's my cue to be like, he's about ready to drop something on me and I need to be able to take this. Okay. Like, Dad, I snuck the iPad out of your room and I watched YouTube all night long. I didn't even sleep. I'm like, okay, thanks for telling me. Let's celebrate that honesty. Good for you. I'm glad you shared that with me. Now, is it right or wrong that you did that? It was wrong. Okay. What do we need to do in the future to make a better decision with that? And then he'll take me through the lesson instead of me having to lecture him. So that's how we handle that. So honesty is celebrated. Work ethic is a big one. We don't give up in this family. My son, my 12-year-old son actually wrote a children's book, Never Give Up No Matter What. So we never give up. If they start a season of something that they hate, the deal is you can quit absolutely when the season's over. But you made a commitment to your team. You made a commitment to your coach. You finish what you start. So working hard, never giving up. Creativity is another big one. In a world where we're surrounded by screens, we can get sucked into being consumers and not producers. So Legos, let's draw, let's do Legos. Let's do something outside. Screen time has a time and a place, but that's not our gig here. We need to be creative. The other thing too is, this might sound kind of weird, but I'm teaching the boys a lot about financial literacy. So they get an allowance every single month. This is going to shock some of your listeners, but they'll understand it once I explain it. My two older ones get $100 a month for allowance, and it's not tied to any chores. I learned that from a podcast guest.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
But they're in charge of all their financial decisions. So like, for instance, they're in charge of paying for their haircut. I took my 12-year-old out last night because he needed a new pair of football pants, practice pants. Who paid for those? He did. So he had to pick football practice pants that he could afford. If we go out to a restaurant, if we go to a sit down place, they don't pay for their food. But if they want to go to like, hey, Dad, can we run by Sonic? Yeah, absolutely. You got your wallet? They pay for that. So they're required to pay for all their stuff. So what I've noticed with that is they'll make really good decisions with finances. And when they mess up, because they do, we get a chance for them to mess up now while it's early. Mm-hmm. And before they're in college and they have a free will with a $3,000 credit card and they just want to spend. So, we're raising men who are creative, who are honest, who work hard, make good financial decisions, and who are most of all empathetic. We don't bully anyone. We're a fan of the underdog. You help people who need to be helped, and you don't push people around.
Great. I like the sound of that. Just to wrap up our conversation, what does it mean to live an authentic life?
It's interesting you're asking me this question because we're getting ready in our mastermind community to teach what we call the integrated man. And at the basis of what the integrated man is it's living an authentic life without being so concerned with judgment, without being concerned of expectations that others have on you or the approval of others. And I'm not saying you have to go out and be a jerk at all, but I say that because so many men and so many humans, we live our life within the realm of wanting approval and wanting to be liked and not to be judged by others. And at the end of the day, the funny thing is no one ever really cares. But that really squashes our potential as people, as men. when that's our guiding light. So living an authentic life is truly embracing all the things that you're not good at or perfect at, and that's okay. Living an authentic life is also being celebratory and being proud of the things of your strengths, right? Living an authentic life is having deep, meaningful connections and relationships with the people that mean most to you. And that means good communication with your kids, good communication with your wife, and being able to share all the good things and all the not so good things.
If the new you met the older you, maybe when you were not a parent yet, when maybe perhaps you were that 4 or 5 year old boy, or you were a teenage boy, you were maybe that 12-year-old boy, what would you say to yourself, knowing what you know about life, fatherhood, this personal development?
That's a really good question, because at 12 years old, I was really lost. No confidence, no self-esteem, no nothing. I think I would have said to that little boy, that, hey, this isn't what life is going to be all about. There's a lot of good out there, and there's a lot of things to even live for. There's a lot of beauty in the world you just don't see right now. You're going to have an amazing marriage with this incredible woman. If you just stay the course, if you just don't give up. And there's a part of me at 12 years old, that's all I want to do is give up. So I think I would have poured just words of affirmation into that young boy of good things to come if he just stays within the belief of himself. I think that's what I would have done.
Great. Where can the listener find you online and connect with you, listen to your podcast, join your father's group? Give me all your details.
Everything we do is at gooddadproject.com. You can find everything we're doing there. On Instagram, it's at the Dad Edge. If you want to be a part of our mastermind group, you can find everything we're doing over there if you go to gooddadproject.com/alliance for that, because it's called Dad Edge Alliance Mastermind.
Thank you so much for being here and being so open and vulnerable. I dare to say that word. I appreciate this conversation very much.
Me too. Thank you for having me on.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it. What's your biggest takeaway? Did you find it useful? How you might apply what you gleaned from this episode into your own life? I want to hear from you. You can send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. You can leave a voicemail, and I do prefer audio to the number 732-763-2576. And for international listeners, you can use the free SpeakPipe tool on the contact page of my website, authenticparenting.com/contact. To access the full episode show notes, visit authenticparenting.com/250. A great place to connect with me is Instagram, a social media platform that I like and enjoy and use almost daily, even though I was taking a social media break for a couple of weeks. My handle is authentic.parenting.podcast, where I share curated version of my personal life. If you find the podcast helpful and enjoy the content, I would appreciate if you could take a quick second to rate and review it on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you want to express your gratitude and say thank you for the content you've been receiving from this podcast for any length of time, consider joining us on patreon.com, patreon.com, where you can show your support for the show and the work of Authentic Parenting. We have multiple levels of support, and you get rewards when you become a monthly subscriber. And of course, you can also make a donation from your heart. That is always appreciated. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your continued listenership and support. It means a lot. Until next week, connect to the present moment to yourself and your children. I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.